and then do a quick audio test. Gosh.
Well, if you're doing an audio test, I should give some audio for you to test.
That would be a good idea.
Alrighty then.
Oh, I guess I have to say something too.
Yeah. Assuming I can get this page to load, and then we'll actually hear. If it picks up after that conversation, then we'll have to do it all over again. Because, Mickey Mouse computer. In theory, this is a decent processor with plenty of RAM and good SSD storage. In practice, it is a toaster. And I don't know if it's just like the Intel NUC form factor is just flawed or what.
When you try and put that
In
much
theory,
stuff in a small space.
This is a decent processor.
Yeah, oh, okay. Let me talk something here so you can hear me.
SSD storage. In practice, it is a toaster. Wow, I haven't seen myself today. I got some sun. Like the Intel NUC form factor is just flawed or what?
When you try and put that much stuff in a small
This is a decent processor.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Let me talk something here so you can hear me.
Storage. In practice, it is a toaster. That worked.
You're not rocking the spray on tan for our video breakout sessions?
Now the weather was so beautiful today that I just went outside and sat on the deck and intentionally followed the sun around. Like moved my chair as the shadows started encroaching on me. I moved around because we hadn't had sun like this in weeks, months maybe. And apparently I overdid it just a little, but it was good. I consider myself solar powered. I work better when I have sun. All right. So I apologize for being late. Thank you guys for being flexible with me. YouTube people, if any of you tried to show up and watch the live stream at the regular time, sorry. We're starting almost an hour and a half late because I had a thing, and I couldn't be here, and the thing kept going longer and longer and longer, and finally I left the thing before it was finished and said, I gotta go.
Things will do that to you.
Yeah. Luckily, that was only thing one. Thing two wasn't around.
Yes. Okay. Let me do a preemptive power cycle. And then begin recording locally if you have not already.
I am recording locally as of before I started talking.
Yep. It's recording.
All right. And again, YouTube viewers, that noise you hear is Miles recording. He doesn't sound as good as he normally does because he's having some audio issues. And it happens, last week he couldn't even be here with us. So we'll take what we can get tonight. It's
going to get better, I promise. It's an incremental thing,
If you could turn on your lower third, Miles, that's a new feature or a new old feature that has returned.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember that thing.
It would...
where do you do that?
It should be just a pop-up panel on the right-hand side of your screen.
Is it the toolbox?
Yes, the Hangouts toolbox. Just put the on button, put in your name and, a website or whatever you want to flog in the tagline.
Tagline. Yeah, there you go. All right.
And then just hit the on button. And it just because it changes the screen formatting, and right now we're kind of looking at up your nose, and when you turn that on, there we go. It'll be better.
Okay.
It uses your Google Plus icon there, so yeah, if you could change that, that'd be great.
You don't like that one?
No, it's fine. I was just being that guy.
Oh, you were being that guy.
Yeah. Mr. Bitcoin, like it. All right. All right, so let's get this show on the road.
Let's get this show on the copper.
I feel like I'm forgetting something. I'm forgetting to open the segment timers. That's what I'm forgetting. Works so
I don't know
well.
what happened with your mark. Somehow ended up there on that line, but
Somebody just hit a button. It happens.
I tried to put it back. It looked weird, so I'll let you mess with it if you want.
What made it look weird?
Well, I mean,
Nothing the old format painter can't fix.
Well, that's better.
You're right. It's just not cooperating. Where is the unindent button?
so what happens if I try that? Decrease indent? Yeah, there you go.
There you go. All right.
Boom.
All right. Now I think I'm actually ready to start. And here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GeekRant, episode 373. Let's talk about books, baby. Recorded March 4th, 2018, and brought to you by Element OP Productions. ElementOP.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Drive Time Radio for Geeks. I am your host, Mark, the Sultan of the Soapbox Cockerel, and joining me this week, once again, both hosts are with us. Seth, the Gooey Kid Anderson, and Miles, the Aussie Junior Wakeham. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, Mark, and did you by any chance mean episode 317?
What did I say?
You said like 371 or 373 or
did
something.
I? Okay.
Yeah. So I was just curious.
Yeah, we have not traveled through time. It is episode 317.
Dyslexia, it's a thing.
It is. And I was jumping around from different parts of the screen there because the title that Seth had there is one that I changed, but I didn't put it there. Inside Baseball, people. I am Ron Burgundy. I will read whatever you put on the screen, even if I read it incorrectly. Sorry about that. So, as the first show of the month, this is one of our pop culture discussions. And this week, we thought we would talk about our favorite book series. And it could be more than one. It could be stuff we haven't read in 30 years. It could be stuff we're reading right now. Just thought it would be fun to talk about books. But first, I want to talk about broken bones. I think I mentioned it last week. My youngest one broke her wrist. She fell out of the swing set. Suffered a buccal fracture of the radius, which is a very common childhood injury. She's in a cast. Today, we were out in the backyard just enjoying the beautiful weather, and she just, walking upstairs, fell. Wasn't doing anything dangerous, just fell, and I'm pretty sure she broke her pinky on the same hand. So it's like the cast goes up and wraps around the thumb and covers about half the hand, and so there's a very small part of her hand that she could possibly have damaged, and I'm pretty sure she broke that. So we're going to have to go back to the orthopedist tomorrow and see what we can do about that. And they're going to be asking the question, do you feel safe at home? Is your father an angry man? No, it's really not. So, oops.
I was thinking you were going to talk about another trip you had to the ER that cost $25,000 this time.
No, hopefully not this time.
Man.
I did want to say, I talked about last week that I think it was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, that I saw The Greatest Showman, and even though I'm not a musical guy, I enjoyed it. That enjoyment has turned to hatred, vehement hatred, because my life is now consumed by the soundtrack to The Greatest Showman. It's playing on every portal that can play music. I wake up in the morning to it. I come home to it. It's on, when I turned on Pandora the other day, the first thing it played was the soundtrack to The Greatest Showman, because that's the last thing my daughter, who's used my account, listened to it. I now hate everything about The Greatest Showman. It is the new Frozen in my life. Make it stop.
Let it go, Mark. Let it go.
All right, so that's all I have to say. I want to hear about your GPU mining rig, Miles.
I had better luck with that than I do with the audio equipment. Sheesh. Yeah, everybody sees. If you're a computer person, you remember the old days when there used to be those repair shops, and somebody had like a computer repair shop, and you'd go in there with your broken laptop or something, and they'd have all the junk around the back, and you know all these guys. This is what they did, right? They fixed computers. Joe's Computer Shop. Well, Joe's Computer Shop can't stay in business anymore, so it's become Joe's GPU Mining Rig Shop. And I'm absolutely convinced if you watch any of these like build your own mining rig on YouTube videos, it's those guys who used to be Joe's Computer Shop. And so, for so long I know Seth, you've gone the right way, and you've gone with purpose-built ASIC hardware to do proper mining, and I've been putting it off, and I thought, well, everybody else is having a good old time with this, I should jump in. So I built a GPU mining rig to mine Ethereum, and it's just, I don't know what to look at. I don't know whether it's a successful exercise or a whole pile of fail. All I know is that in Arizona we paid 23 cents a kilowatt hour, and it's horrible. And
yeah, that's a fail for you.
That's a serious fail. And you know what? Now solar is a really cool thing, and I'm all on solar, and I've forgotten about the mining. I'm only interested in how to get solar now. That's what happens.
Well, GPU rigs have always been inefficient, but when it was easy to mine Bitcoin, that was worth it. So Ethereum has already jumped past the point where it's not cost productive anymore.
No, it can be, but the problem is the cost of the capital equipment. Like if you go out looking for a graphics card of any variety these days, be prepared to spend $500.
Yeah, they're crazy expensive.
Just to walk into the shop. I mean, it's nuts. And when you want to buy 6 or 8 of them to put in a rig, that's some serious cash. And
the $500 are the cheap ones for GPU mining. You're talking almost $1,000 for the current leaders. And the thing is, they're going to do the proof of stake rules switch to Ethereum sometime this year. And then that's really going to screw up all of the mom and pop miners who just, have a couple of rigs going. It's really going to favor the institutions who buy and hoard their Ethereum. So, yay, open source blockchain technology, centralized for the man.
Yeah. So this is, So I've learned a lot, and it's priceless knowledge. I could have got it watching YouTube videos, but no stupid idiot here had to go and buy a bunch of graphics cards and set this thing up. But anyway, I don't know. I have faith. Maybe in a year and a half, I'll have paid for all the capital equipment back again.
And so, Seth, we don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm curious about you want to review a movie here that I had absolutely no interest in seeing just from the previews. When the previews can't even make you interested, when they take the best parts of the movie and distill it down to 90 seconds and it still can't make you interested, I think that's a really seriously bad movie. But you braved it so that I don't have to. So tell us about Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets.
Okay, well, it's on Amazon. It's part of their new release videos. So, I didn't go see it at the theaters. I watched it on Amazon. So I'm already shelling out the money. I might as well use my service. And overall, I can definitely tell why the movie was not successful. It wasn't so much a bad movie. It was sort of like a chewing gum movie. Oh, that's interesting, fine, nice to do. And then when it's over, it's like, what did I accomplish? Nothing. There are some really awesome visuals in the film that, I think they were really good. And the character that Rihanna plays, what they did with her, okay, that was kind of cool. But most of all, it was too short for the amount of story they wanted to tell. So they either should have pared the story down or made it like a 2-part series. So I think it would be a good movie to watch whenever you don't really want to watch a movie, but you just want to do something. So, it didn't suck, but it wasn't great. It was a thoroughly average movie with some pretty good visuals, not even special effects, just some visuals in it were pretty cool. And some of the things they did were they had some unique spins. So it's an okay movie, not a bad movie. Some of the some of the things coming, you see them coming a mile away, and but that's most movies these days. So it's very simplistically done. Not a bad movie, not a great movie. Something to do when you want to do something but aren't necessarily looking to watch a movie. So
it's a background movie, is what you're saying.
Yeah, background's probably right, because the plot points are few and far between. So good it's an okay background movie. I don't want to use the word good, but at the same time I don't want to use the word bad, but it's a filler background movie.
Anytime somebody says I can't use the word good about a movie, that automatically means it's bad. If you're just being nice, that's fine.
Well, but the acting, it wasn't bad acting. Dialogue wasn't horrible. The special effects, they weren't bad. It was a thoroughly average movie.
All right.
So
now let's talk about books. Initially, I thought we'd talk about our favorite book series because, if you're a reader, you like to read a lot. That's just sort of the way things go. And I've talked about it before. I have never been a reader. I actually do not enjoy the physical act of scanning my eyes across a line of text. I can tolerate it more when text is on a screen. If I have to turn pages, actually make my fingers flip a page from one to the other, I'm just out. I just don't enjoy that at all. And a few years ago, I discovered Audible, lmnop.com/audible, and that literally changed my life. I went from having not read, more than 10 books in 20 years to reading, on average, a book a week. Currently, I'm in the middle of a Peter F. Hamilton book that is 40 hours of narration, so I can't get through that in a week. But on average, I read about a book a week. So I have just recently dived into series of books. But before I talk about my favorite series, I want to mention three books that have the rereadability test. Now, I have largely an eidetic memory. Once I read something, I memorize it. I'm not totally photographic, but really close. And so for me to reread a book is pretty unusual. And of course, I don't quite have the auditory recall, but I do remember things really well. So if I'm going to listen to an audiobook, if I'm going to spend 10 hours twice on that book, it has to be a pretty special book. And there's really only a couple, three I can think of off the top of my head that have passed that. So I want to talk about those. Ready Player One, Ernest Cline. I have listened to that book twice, and will probably do it one more time before I go see the movie. The Martian. I have listened to that movie twice, by Martin Weir. Listened to that book, rather. And the third one just flew out of my head. It'll come back to me in a minute. What was it? Anyway, books that I have that I go back and re-listen to are pretty special. But in terms of the series of books that I have been most drawn into, aside from Tolkien and his stuff, that's sort of iconic. The Lost Fleet series by Jack Campbell. It starts with a character, Black Jack Geary. He is frozen in suspended animation, basically a lifeboat pod, for in excess of 100 years. And there has been a war raging for that entire 100 years that he's been asleep. And they wake him up, and two things happen. One, by seniority, he is the most senior officer in all the fleet because he's over 100 years old. So immediately he's in command of the fleet. And secondly, in this 100 years of war, the war has been so brutal that anybody who knew how to fight a war died. And so you basically have these new recruits coming straight out of the academy and then going straight head on into battle and dying. And then they're building ships and mining recruits as fast as they can. So he's in command of a fleet, and he's the only one who actually knows how to fight a battle on both sides, on his side and on the other side. So it's really fascinating the way Jack Campbell talks about fighting battles in space, where you're traveling at near relativistic speeds, like I'm traveling at half the speed of light, you're traveling at half the speed of light. Together, we're intersecting at the speed of light. How am I going to make a move now when I've got 10 days to get there, but you're going to see the light happen in about 6 hours. So I really don't have about 6 hours of advantage. But then there's the whatever maneuvers you take are also going to take 10 days. So that 6 hours of advantage really make a big difference, even though it's 10 days between encounters. That cerebral aspect of the book series really kept me going. There's 6 books in the original series, and then another 6 in a follow-up series, and then they go on to explore the universe, the expanded universe. I'm less interested in those other ones, but the Lost Fleet specifically, and then the next one, which is dang, I can't remember what the second series is. I'll look it up while Seth's talking about his. But that to me has a real satisfying sort of thing about it. It's good physics. I like good hard science. It's good drama. And if you get it on Audible, Christian Rummel is one of my favorite readers. In fact, I buy books just because he's read them, even if I'm not interested in or don't know anything about the story. He's just that good. So The Lost Fleet, Jack Campbell, it's a good long series that you could enjoy. Do you guys have any questions or comments on that one? Seth, I know you've read those books too.
Yes, I thoroughly enjoyed the Lost Fleet series. The follow-up one, I was out after 2 books. It didn't interest me. But the original series, yes, it was great. I loved it. It held my interest. That was I read 6 books in 2.5 day series. So there was no other world but the one Jack Campbell created for a weekend for me. So great. I highly recommend those books. Those would be high up on my list of series as well. But yeah, great recommendation. And you also get the Steve Gibson recommendation to amplify Mark's. And I'll just throw mine in there too. So you've got the trifecta of 3 brilliant. Sorry. I just had to throw that out there.
So the Lost Fleet, then Beyond the Frontier. The Lost Fleet is 6 books. Beyond the Frontier is 5 books. And then the Lost Stars is that expanded universe stuff. The Beyond the Frontier kept my attention. It wasn't as good as the first 6. And I've only read 2, maybe just 1, I think 2 of the Lost Stars. And then the Genesis Fleet is sort of a back to the beginning, I think. I haven't actually read that. Jack Campbell, John Hemry, Jack Campbell is his pen name, is still writing books, and that excites me. That's good stuff there. But I really enjoyed it, and I still can't think of that 3rd book that I was so excited about. I've read it more than once. Why can't I remember it? All right. So now, Seth, let's talk about. So this was a book series that I really enjoyed, and Seth really enjoyed. Now Seth is going to talk about a book series that he really enjoyed, and I really didn't.
Okay. I want to talk about the Honorverse, and it has spun up into 3 different series. It's kind of collapsing back down to 1. But this is David Weber, the man who will not use 1,000 words to describe anything he can use 5,000 words to describe. He is quite the prolific writer. But I love the character. Now, having said that, the first time I sat down and tried to read on Basilisk Station, I got halfway through the prologue, and I couldn't do it. It just I wasn't feeling it. It was like too many names thrown at me, and there wasn't enough action to put the names in context. And then probably a couple of months later, I was like, Steve Gibson still talks about this. I'm going to try it once more. I don't know. I was on a good sugar high or something, but it stuck into me. And these books are available for free, legally free on the internet through the Bain Public Library or free library CDs that they put out and said they're free to distribute. So it wasn't like somebody is ripping them off. They did this themselves to get their stuff out there. So if you can find the CDs on the internet places still, you can read the first several books in the series and see if you like it. But it starts off with this commander of a cruiser in a spacefaring navy ends up relegated to this backwaters outpost and prevents an invasion and kind of holds off on interstellar war coming. Honor Harrington, female starship captain, basically a rare, strong woman in a male-dominated genre. But I thoroughly enjoyed, say, the first half of the main series because it's centered on her and her ship, and eventually it it gets so large and the cast of characters gets so great that if I were to pick it up midway through, I probably wouldn't have cared about it. But there's enough interest, and then some of the sub-series kind of takes on another commander and his ship, so you still get that small dialogue, the quippy dialogue, the fun stuff, the action. Because when he gets into the politics, sometimes he gets way too deep into the politics. But there is enough action and enough love of the characters that it has kept me going. And now my favorite subseries of the one he's doing is probably the Crown of Slaves subseries, because the banter between the two people, I mean, like, I'm literally laughing as I read the stuff. But I thoroughly enjoyed the books, so much so that I went back and bought all. Okay, I'm cheap. I went back and bought all the ones I had read for free because I wanted to support the author. And now I buy the hardback version of the book when it first comes out because I want to read it rather than, waiting for the paperback. So if I'm paying full price for something, I can't give you a higher recommendation to read the books. But it started off kind of a space representation of the 1800s conflict between England and France, and it's kind of morphed into other stuff. But it was just, I just really enjoyed the space battles and the camaraderie of the ship and how it works. And and you have the good guys and the bad guys, and later on some of the good guys were bad and some of the bad guys were good and all that kind of stuff. But I just really enjoyed it. There's enough shoot 'em up action, and the politics, some of the intrigue is good. And then the one bad thing, he made this decision. Originally, he was going to, at the one particular battle, he was going to kill off Honor Harrington. And then the book series was going to pick up with her children like 20 years in the future. Well, he decided to keep her alive, and so he's trying to jam 20 years worth of development into these novels. And so the last 3 or 4 novels have been probably 50% more similar, the exact same content between them. And so it gets kind of old when it's like, because I don't have a photographic memory, but I remember a lot of stuff that I've read. And so it's like, I've read this exact chapter. Like, this is my 3rd time now. I'm very familiar with it. But I have reread the series. I did my initial reading. I've reread it. I'm probably going to reread it again this year, just because, I spend more time with Honor Harrington than with any other girl. I called her my girlfriend until she went off and got married. So,
spoiler alert.
Well, I mean, she got married. So if you go into like the Honorverse website or whatever, it shows, obviously her name's different because she's married now. So sorry. Yeah. Guess what? There's battles and people die too. More spoilers. But
so
no, I really enjoyed it.
The Honorverse is if the Lost Fleet is Star Trek, the Honorverse is Babylon 5. It is very political oriented. It happens to be in space, but the story is about politics and intrigue. If that's for you, great. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't poorly written.
Babylon 5.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was great. And then my other, in a total 180 degrees different, Louis L'Amour. I love reading his books. So you can't go wrong reading a Louis L'Amour Western novel. So
okay,
those are my 2 things.
All right, and Miles, your turn.
Well, I'm not a prolific book reader. I'll admit that up front. When I read either because I found myself at a holiday resort somewhere and I want to just relax, or it's some work assignment. So it's not something that I've been running to, but there's a couple of authors that have had different effects at different times in my life. And whenever they come out with a new book, I've pretty much rushed to get it. Daniel Suarez is probably one of my favorite authors, only because he's a computer guy who used to live near where I used to live in Southern California and did a job very similar to what I used to do down there. And it's kind of, I relate to the guy, but his writing is outstanding. If you're into cyberpunk kind of stories or technology focused, twisting, take some new technology which has just either come out or right on the cusp and then turn it into a thriller and sort of a story like how it should never be used, but that becomes the theory of his fiction. then you've pretty much summed the guy up. And his first book, Demon, was pretty much about video games and virtual reality, sort of coming into the real world, and he kind of had a follow-up book to that. And then he's done a number of other books that I actually really enjoying his latter work. He did a book called Kill Decision, which was excellent if you're into drones, and the theory about what happens if drones en masse get taken over by bad actors like government agencies that want to use them as a killing machine. So they weaponize drones and then fly millions of them into the sky and swarm attack, their targets, things like that. Kind of scary, but it's a thing you've got to think about, because we geeks tend to invent this stuff and then they end up getting used against us.
So before you move on to your next one, let me talk about my experiences with Daniel Suarez. Demon, his first book from, I think, 2006, Wikipedia, yes, 2006. Really enjoyed that book. It's technology that exists today being used in a way that is technically possible, though extremely difficult. But the center of the book is a tortured genius who had a brain tumor and was just a total nutbag, and he turned his both genius and nutbaggery into creating this world. And I really enjoyed that book a whole lot. The follow-up to it, Freedom, I liked a little less. The follow-up to that, Kill Decision, which is only barely a follow-up, I didn't have the same experience Miles did with it. I found it mildly interesting, and it was to the point where I was not interested in following any more of his work. I lost interest in it. It became more political. It became more James Bond type stuff, and that's fine if you like that. It's just not for me. I was geeked out about the technology of the first two, and the third one became more a quasi love story, spy adventure type novel that also had cool tech in it, and it just lost my interest. But you have this wide range of input here, so there's something probably to love from our audience about any of them. Seth, have you read any Daniel Suarez?
No, not yet.
All right.
His last book is interesting because it is slightly different. It's called Change Agent, and it's an interesting theory about DNA modification. And I worked in biotech for a while, so I kind of have a bit of a I'm not an expert in gene splicing or anything like that, but I get a sense of what could be done. And this story takes it to a ridiculous degree, but there's a whole lot of things that, are actually likely scenarios. Like in the very early chapters of the book, you come face to face with the problem that if people are allowed to biohack genes, then what happens when a couple are having a baby or want to have a baby, and they go to these third-party underground biohacking labs so that their kid gets stronger than everybody else, smarter than everybody else, better constitution, more resistance to disease, those sorts of things. And it becomes a black market commodity because the government doesn't want that stuff being sold. You come face to face, but that's a real problem because, in the past it used to be, well, the government's going to ban cloning humans. Yeah, but the Chinese clone sheep and they clone other things, and who knows? Scientists do stuff because they're scientists. And there's very little regulation that's really brought to bear on this. And even I think what we're seeing as technology moves forward, that the more that a government wants to clamp down on the use of something, the more likely some geek is going to do it in their garage. And when it comes down to biohacking kids, the ramification of you creating a super child and what that could be in terms of the rest of society and how it disrupts, imagine team sports, right? Your kid's got, DNA that makes them able to lift 400 pounds and everyone else is a little weakling on the softball team. Well, hello. that sort of likely scenario is real. And he talks to those things. And And those things are interesting conversations to me. I like hearing about that sort of stuff. So yeah, I would rate his books highly because of that.
A good movie on that same subject, underrated movie in my opinion, was Gattaca, starring some people you know, Ethan Hawke, for example, late '90s, I think. Would you say Uma Thurman? Yeah,
Yeah.
Late '90s. Good book on that same subject of when everybody can genetically engineer their child, what happens to those who choose not to? So worth the watch. And I did remember the game, the other books that I've reread. I can't believe they left my head. Ender's Game, Orson Scott Card. It's a long series of books, but the two best of breed are Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow. Read those two, and you won't regret it. All right, now back to you, Miles.
Well, the only other author that came to mind is Terry Pratchett. Have you guys read any of his work?
No, I have not.
Well, he's
Neither have I.
Okay, he's a fantasy writer, comedian. Very, very good writer, very good storyteller. Invents these worlds that are kind of, sort of, like Tolkien on a planet somewhere. But very comedic. And the thing about the guy isn't so much his books, because he's one of these guys who's written 50 books. I mean, at least that probably. But it's more, he died a couple of years ago, and his story of going from a very successful book author in England to being dead was actually chronicled by the BBC. He did a number of documentaries. He died of, it was like a neurological disorder, and bit by bit he gradually lost the use of his hands so he couldn't type, and then the use of his mind so he couldn't remember. And he tried struggling to write books all the way through the day he died, and he wasn't that old when he died. And this was all captured on video. It's a very sad story, but you get to understand a little bit about what made the guy tick. But that actually wasn't the reason why he came on my radar. I remember I think it was in the mid-2000s, Sky, the TV channel in the UK, did a full-length movie for television called The Hogfather. And it was done right at Christmas time. And it was Terry Pratchett's twist on Christmas. And it was the most funny, beautiful, touching story that had nothing to do with the Christmas tale, but it was his rendition in his crazy science fiction world. And I know my whole family, we all watched it, but it was one of those moments that I had when myself and my wife and my daughter all watched this thing, and we all, it'll bring you to tears. I mean, it's crazy. And this is a fantasy sci-fi author doing this. And when I knew that a guy like that could do it, I thought, yeah, this guy's amazing. But here's the thing, and this is a warning about his stuff. When you start reading his books, his actual words on page, it's really not a comfortable experience. You feel like you just went to some English lit class in college. I mean, it's not pleasant reading. It doesn't tell the story in human terms. It's a very highbrow style. And I find there's a lot of movies that have been made of his books, and they're excellent. And there are two that, if you can hunt them down, one's called The Color of Magic, which is a fantastic story. If you like Tolkien, you'd love this guy. And the other one is called The Hogfather, which is amazing. And both of them you may be able to find on Netflix. I know they came out in the UK. I'm not sure where they're available here, but definitely worth checking it out. And maybe having had the experience of watching those, you too might end up wanting to go and get the other 40 or so books he ever wrote before he died.
Yeah, the Color of Magic was the book one of the Discworld series, which was what he was most well known for, which I think is like 20-something books. It's a lot of books in the series.
It is. And like I said, they're not an easy read. But, look, if you love Tolkien and you can read that, he's a walk in the park.
Yeah, Tolkien is one of the few books, the Lord of the Rings series, I have read, actually physically read more than once. So that speaks to the quality. I did something I hated doing for a long time because they're long books twice.
Yeah, I think people consider him as the sort of late 20th century, early 21st century Tolkien in his realm. And I know that's a real high praise, but he has been able to get that sort of, effect.
Seth, we sort of blew past Louis L'Amour, and I shouldn't have done that. There are people in this audience who may not know who Louis L'Amour is and what he does. Talk a little bit about why you like him and what he does.
Well, one, he just paints such a great picture of the West. He was born around the turn of the century from 1800s to the 1900s. So he really wasn't like in that time period, but like his parents were. And so he traveled the world. He did all kinds of things, merchant marine, everything, all different places of the world. But his passion was he was collecting stories from the Old West. And whenever you read his books, most of them are set in, if you're from America, it's called the Old West. And his characters are fiction, but he writes a lot of real characters who actually existed into his stories that his fictional characters will interact with. And he actually gets the geography right. And I came across this website where this guy was like tracing Louis L'Amour. And so he was like, you could follow and you could go to places and like, oh, this is where he was talking about. And, the old time, and this was something that was done many, many years ago now. It was done pre-web and kind of imported over to the web. And people were saying, yeah, he could have been a geography teacher because his descriptions were so great. But his stories, I mean, they're kind of simple, but he tells them so well. The one bad thing about him is like sometimes he doesn't know how to end the book. So you get this great story and then it's not so much a climax. The climax is super quick and then it's over. That would be my one drawback. But just reading his stories, it's like you're transported to another time, another place, and it's like you're actually living in the Old West with people who kind of, came from the East to settle the frontier. Most of and I have not read all of his books. I've probably
well over 100.
Yeah, I've read maybe 20. But the good guys win, kind of. White hat, black hat. The white hats always win. That's kind of his motif. But just excellent stories. The visualizations, like. I remember reading, it was actually the first, I didn't realize at the time, but it was the first Sakic novel he wrote. And that's one of his families, and he wrote kind of like a whole series of them. But it was just some of the phrasing that he wrote describing the prayers. Like, that is just maybe one of the best descriptive sentences I have ever read. And so just an awesome author, hundreds of books. And then there's other short stories. Just enjoyable. He is someone who tells tales of the authentic Old West. He's not like somebody from today who's making up a character, who goes, but he's like, these characters, like I say, most of his characters are fiction, but he runs into real people who were known, and has interactions with them. And like one of the things I'm trying to do now, and I need to do some further research, is I want to read the real books that he references in his stories. So anyway, just highly recommended. If you have any desire to learn the history of the Old West and get a feel for what it was like, you can read his stories and get that.
Yeah, I never read any of his stuff, but my granddad always had a Louis L'Amour book in his hand. And I probably should go read that just for that connection with my granddad. But every couple of weeks, he'd go down to the used bookstore down not far from our house, and he would buy a stack of Louis L'Amour paperbacks. And he'd read one a day, maybe every other day. They were pretty quick reads for him. And he just loved those books. He died when I was in middle school, so I never really had an adult-ish connection with him. Never asked him why he liked them. I just knew that he did. But yeah, he was a very popular author of well over 100 books.
And I mean, some of them are long, but most of them are under 200 pages. So they are not long reads, and they're not hard reads. They read very fast, and they're not that long. You know, some of them do get into the 200 to 300 page range, but a lot of them are less than 200 pages. So they're not, you know, you read a David Weber book, you can take like 3 Louis L'Amour books, and it's the same thickness. So just he knows how to use one sentence when other people would use a paragraph or a page, and convey almost the exact same information.
I think some people consider that like a badge of honor. You know, how many books, how many words you can use. You know, Faulkner was sort of famous for overwriting. That was the Faulknerian style, was to way overwrite. And some of these pillars of the literary community are all guilty of that. And personally, I like concise writing, which is why I have trouble with like Peter F. Hamilton. His stories are good, but you know, he uses a lot of words to convey a simple thought. Maybe that was a style thing of the past. I don't know. We'll see. And but it's interesting that there are sort of two schools of thought there, and you can enjoy both. But I wonder. My concern is that the digital audio world in which we live, the video and audio world that we live, is going to kill books themselves. Not necessarily storytelling. Like, you know, for example, in the way that I consume them, it's still a book. It's just not a paper thing. It's a story told in a style intended to be read. And I worry that art is going to be lost because we are such visual creatures, we humans. Storytelling is still an endemic part of what we do. When anytime you get a group of humans together, we're going to launch into storytelling eventually. Storytelling is a big part of what we do, and yet our culture devalues the story. And so that's kind of why I like doing podcasts about books. Even though, you know, I'm not a big reader, I do enjoy consuming stories that are intended to be read aloud. And I worry that that's being lost. Maybe every generation worries about that. But as I get older, I find that protecting stories is more important to me than it ever has been before.
That's an interesting observation. I mean, I would say also that there's the emerging authors that are coming in. We're not seeing as many fiction writers coming in as we are seeing people using books as a way to authenticate their blog or their podcast or their YouTube channel, because the barrier to entry on those things is so low, and yet to write a book has a high barrier to entry, and it kind of solidifies the author as an expert in their field, should we say.
That's an interesting point.
I think as a culture, we just don't have the attention span to read a novel anymore. Now, not individuals, I understand, but as a culture, we don't. And two, there are still tons of fiction writers. You can find their work on Fox News and MSNBC every day. So.
Touche, my friend. Touche. So now, I kind of ruined your excellent segue about Louis L'Amour's historical books, but let's try to go back and pretend that I didn't and say, Seth, now that we're talking about history, what happened this week in history?
All right, Mark. Well, I wanted to let our fine viewing audience know that on March the 4th, 1977, the first Cray 1 supercomputer is shipped to the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. This supercomputer, which cost $19 million, will be used to design sophisticated weapon systems. The system is a cylindrical tower, 7 feet tall, 9 feet in diameter, and weighs approximately 5.5 tons. The machine produced so much heat that it required a built-in Freon-based refrigeration system, and it requires its own electrical substation to power it at a cost of roughly $35,000 a month. The Cray 1 was 10 times faster than competing machines, but speed came at a cost. It drew over 115 kilowatts of power, enough to run approximately 10 homes, and over 60 miles of wire snaked through the Cray 1 with no segment longer than 3 feet to minimize signal delays. It boasted a world record speed of 133 megaflops and an impressive 8 megabyte main memory. And just for some comparison, I found the 2015 chart from Tom's Hardware. Intel's i7 run at 175 gigaflops.
So a flop is a
mark
floating operation per second. So the 133 million versus 175 billion out of your desktop PC.
Correct.
Wow. At $35,000 a month cost of power, I'm going to shut up about GPU mining now.
And so when I make jokes about the fact that we all have supercomputers in our pockets, I'm not kidding, because my phone maybe not 133 megaflops, but in the ballpark.
No, if you have a phone from the last couple of years, you exceed this. My crappy phone probably doesn't match it, but the first chart I found from 2010 talked about the high-end desk phone or high-end phones being able to match this speed.
Yeah.
So
we literally have supercomputers in our pockets, and we whine about them being slow.
Yeah, and that 115 kilowatts of power, you could run. You could run if my miner runs roughly 1 kilo. What do I run? Yeah, about a kilowatt of power. So you could have 100 ASIC Bitmain S9s powering through for that much power. You could be raking in some Bitcoin buck right there.
It's like flipping the switch on just under 120 microwaves at once. That's what running this thing was like. I have a house that's not super old. It's in 25-ish years old. And when you turn the microwave on, the lights blink just a little. Imagine doing that 120 times at the same time to have less power than your iPhone 10, whatever. What are we up to? 7?
8? 7 miles of cable in something that size. And these things were hand assembled. They weren't like mass produced. They were hand building the components and assembling them together. So it took months to deliver one of these things.
And now, Seth, what do you have to lower my productivity, thus making you seem like a better hiring option?
Okay, Mark. Well, if you were to have fired up a Cray and got the electric bill and thought, crap, I've got to save some money. Well, I have just the website for you. You have no need to throw out your old calendars because they can be reused at a later date. You can go to whencanireusethiscalendar.com and you can either check the current date and it will tell you when you can reuse that calendar, and it will tell you what year previous calendars work. So for example, in 2018, a calendar from 1923 or 1934 or as recent as 1990 or 2007 could all be reused this year. So save the calendar. You can use it in the future to help pay off your electric bill. So anyway, Mark, that's what I have for you this week.
So this is a joke, right? But when I was in 5th, 6th grade, an insurance agent in town gave promotional stuff to all the students, thinking maybe he'll make us future customers or something. And they were calendars, pocket wallet calendars from 1955 that matched whatever that year that it was when I was in school. And so I learned then that was a thing that you could do because of a cheapskate real estate or insurance agent in my town.
Cool.
I mean, it makes sense. Calendar repeats itself every few years. So when can I reuse this calendar? For people who need more of an excuse to hoard than they already have. And now this is the part of the show where I tell you how you can feed back to us. Let us know what you think. Go to elementop.com, click the Contact Us button at the top of the page, and fill out the world's hardest CAPTCHA. Then fill out the form there. That gets priority in my inbox. Or you can send an email to geekrant@elementop.com. That goes to all three of us. Or you can go to 559-IAM-OPI, dial 559-IAM-OPI on any phone device of your choice, and leave us a voicemail on the Google Voice line. We haven't had one of those in a while, and we'll probably play it on the show. We appreciate your feedback. We hope that you have enjoyed this trip down literary lane. I don't know. That was a bad lead in, but let us know what you think about whatever we do. We enjoy your feedback, even the bad stuff. You should see us getting together and laughing at the punctuation. No, we really don't do that. that. But we like hearing what you have to say. We like it better if you're praising us, but it's okay if you're not. And again, don't just tell us about it. Go tell the world about it. Go to the iTunes. As much as I hate it, iTunes is still the de facto directory of the web for podcasts. I don't think it's going to be that way for long, but it still is for right now. So go to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review, and that would be really appreciated. Miles, Seth, any final words of wisdom for the night?
Yay.
No.
And that's why they're the best in the business, ladies and gentlemen. I do want to make a plug for money. I hate doing this, but I did my taxes last weekend for the year, and I filled out my Schedule Cs, and as you people in other countries don't know what that's about, but in the U.S., we have the self-employment form, the business profit and loss form is called a Schedule C. And when I filled all that out and ran all the numbers, Element OP Productions made approximately $1,200 profit last year. By the time I fed some of that back into the business and paid these guys, essentially each of us made about $1.50 to $2 per hour that we did this show last year. And that's revenue from all sources, right? So that's revenue from the Audible subscriptions, the elementop.com/Audible. That's revenue from Patreons. That's revenue from eBay, PayPal tips, not eBay. That's revenue from Amazon affiliate links. From all sources, we made roughly $100 a month profit last year. That when split up and divided by hours means that we got paid less than $2 an hour to bring you this show. I'm not whining about it. I enjoy doing this, but I am saying, I'm asking you, how much is this show worth to you? Is it worth more than $1 an hour? If so, it's up to you to make that happen. I'm not out there knocking on the doors of Ford and Rocket Mortgage and these guys trying to get them to sponsor a podcast. It's up to you. If you like it, pay for what you like. And if you, like me, are ashamed to go to Miles and Seth and say, hey, guys, I'd like to send you $1.75 per hour for all the work you did last year, that embarrassed me when I had to do that. But it's where we are. So if you want this show to continue, the best way to make sure that happens is to pay the people that do it. As plain and simple as I can make it. I don't like to beg, but reality is reality. So go to patreon.com/elementop and stand up and be counted. Pledge $1 a show. I think that's reasonable. I think we give you $1 worth of that's 2 cents a minute. We do roughly a 50-minute show these days. If we're worth 2 cents a minute, pledge $1 a show over at Patreon. So I'm done begging. Thanks for being with us, everybody. The couple of guys that were hanging out in the chat room, thank you for being with us. YouTube, again, we apologize for the low audio quality on this one, but at 2 cents a minute, it's not worth it for me to go back and fix it. It's just not. So you get poor audio quality because you're not paying me. Sorry. We'll see you next week, everybody, because that's it for this episode of the GeekRant podcast. And remember, pay for what you like.
Toodaloo.
All right, and that's the show.
Hey, my computer didn't crash.
Woo! Guys in the chat room, guys watching on YouTube after the fact, thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you later, because I'm cutting you off now.